They say money can buy almost anything, but not a healed heart. Imagine a man with more wealth than most of us can even dream of. A millionaire who owned skyscrapers, fleets of cars, and luxury homes in every corner of the world. Yet despite all his riches, he carried a deep emptiness inside him, a wound that no amount of money could repair. For years, people tried to get close to him, not out of love, but for what he could give them. He had grown cold, detached, and unwilling to trust anyone. But then, in the most unexpected way, a young black girl stepped into his world. She had nothing compared to his wealth, no riches, no powerful last name, no glamorous reputation. Yet she carried something he had lost long ago: hope, compassion, and the courage to see beyond his fortune. When she told him, "I can fix your broken heart," no one believed her. Not the people who worked for him, not the friends who secretly doubted her worth, not even the millionaire himself. But what happened next shocked everyone. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about power. It was about humanity, injustice, and the strength of one voice determined to heal another. So, how could a girl society try to teach a man with everything to find the one thing he was missing? Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will change the way you think about love, healing, and who truly holds the power to mend a broken heart. The millionaire's name was Daniel Cross, a man whose life was an open book in newspapers, magazines, and television screens. To the outside world, Daniel had everything. Towering buildings in his name, a luxury jet that could fly him anywhere at a moment's notice, and a sprawling estate where the gates alone were worth more than most people's homes. People saw his sharp suits, his polished shoes, his powerful walk, and they assumed he was untouchable, indestructible, and perhaps even heartless. But behind closed doors, when the cameras stopped flashing and the crowds disappeared, Daniel lived in silence. His mansion echoed not with laughter but with loneliness. He had once known love, a family he cherished, but tragedy had ripped it away from him. Since then, his heart was locked away, hidden behind walls higher than the skyscrapers he built. He trusted no one, because everyone seemed to want something from him. They wanted access, they wanted favors, they wanted his money. No one wanted him. On the other side of the city, far from Daniel's glittering world, lived a young black girl named Amara. She didn't grow up with privilege, yet she carried herself with a quiet strength that money could never buy. Life had not been kind to her either. She had faced rejection, judgment, and the painful sting of being underestimated because of her race, her gender, and her circumstances. Still, Amara had something far more valuable than wealth. She had a heart that refused to harden. She saw the world not for what it was, but for what it could be. Their worlds should never have collided. One was a man who had everything but nothing at the same time. The other was a girl who had almost nothing, yet everything that truly mattered. Fate, however, has a strange way of weaving threads together. Daniel's path and Amara's were about to cross. Not in a boardroom, not in a mansion, but in a moment that would strip away status, money, and pride, leaving only two souls standing, face to face. And it was in that moment, when she looked into his eyes and saw pain buried beneath wealth, that Amara said the words no one dared to speak. "I can fix your broken heart." What followed would reveal not just who Daniel really was, but who Amara was destined to become. Daniel's wealth had insulated him from many of life's daily struggles, but it couldn't shield him from loneliness. He attended meetings in skyscrapers with men in tailored suits who flattered him, but when those boardroom doors closed, their loyalty vanished. He hosted dinners in golden halls where glasses clinked and laughter rang out, but at the end of the night, he sat at his vast dining table alone, the silence louder than any crowd. One rainy evening, when his thoughts were at their heaviest, Daniel decided to walk through a part of the city he had long ignored. The streets were nothing like the marble floors he was used to. Here, neon signs flickered above small shops, children played barefoot on cracked sidewalks, and strangers looked at him with wary eyes. For once, he wasn't a billionaire in a tailored suit. He had dressed down, hoping to be invisible. Yet still he carried the aura of someone who didn't belong, and it was there in the heart of that forgotten street that he noticed her. Amara. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't chasing after money or power. She was kneeling beside a little boy whose shoes had torn apart, carefully patching them with scraps she had gathered. Her clothes were simple, her hands a little worn, but her spirit radiated something Daniel hadn't seen in years. Compassion that asked for nothing in return. But as Daniel watched from a distance, something else caught his attention. Across the street, a group of people laughed cruelly at Amara. They whispered to each other, their sneers sharp, their eyes filled with that familiar venom reserved for those society had wrongly decided were less. The laughter wasn't about the boy's shoes. It was about her, her skin, her presence, her existence in a world that still saw difference as something to mock. Daniel felt his chest tighten. He had faced betrayal, greed, and heartbreak, but he had never felt this. A raw, ugly injustice unfolding before him. Amara, however, didn't flinch. She kept her focus on the child, brushing aside the cruelty around her as if it didn't matter. Her strength was quiet, but it was powerful. A resistance Daniel didn't understand yet, but one he couldn't look away from. In that moment, Daniel realized something uncomfortable. All his wealth, his status, his influence, none of it gave him the courage Amara displayed in silence. She was richer than he was, though not in the way the world measured wealth. He followed her from a distance that evening, not out of suspicion, but out of curiosity. Who was this girl who could shine light in the darkest corners, even as shadows pressed in on her? Why did her presence stir something in him that no business deal, no luxury, no fleeting pleasure ever had? The answer would come soon, and when it did, Daniel's life and heart would never be the same. It happened on a day that should have been ordinary. The city bustled with its usual rhythm, people rushing to work, buses screeching to halts, voices echoing through crowded streets. Daniel had gone again to the neighborhood where he had first seen Amara, drawn there by an invisible pull he couldn't explain. That afternoon, Amara stood outside a small community center, handing out meals she had prepared herself. Her smile was gentle but strong, her voice warm as she encouraged the children and comforted the elders who shuffled by. Daniel stayed hidden in the crowd, his eyes fixed on her, the way she moved, the way she gave without asking for anything back. But then the moment shattered. A man in an expensive suit, someone Daniel recognized from his own social circles, stormed into the scene. His voice cut through the air like a blade, sharp, dismissive, and dripping with contempt. He looked at Amara not as a human being, but as something beneath him. He mocked her, belittled her efforts, and threw out words so vile that they silenced the children and left the elders staring at the ground. And then, as if his cruelty weren't enough, he shoved the tray of food she was carrying, sending it crashing to the pavement. Stew spilled into the dirt, bread scattered into the gutter. Children gasped. Amara froze, her eyes wide with the pain of not just humiliation, but of knowing this was not the first time, nor would it be the last. Daniel felt his blood boil. For years he had sat through boardroom betrayals, endured fake friendships, and ignored the brokenness of the world outside his bubble. But this was different. This was cruelty laid bare, racism unmasked in its ugliest form. And it was happening to the very person who had shown him what true strength looked like. In that instant, Daniel stepped forward, no longer a quiet observer, no longer the man hiding behind anonymity. He revealed himself, his voice thundering, over the crowd, demanding respect for the woman who had carried herself with more dignity than anyone he had ever known. The suited man scoffed, sneering at Daniel as if to say he had lost his mind defending someone like her. But then came the shock. The whispers. The realization spreading like wildfire. Daniel was no ordinary passerby. He was Daniel Hart, the billionaire, the untouchable name spoken in hushed tones across the city. And here he was, standing shoulder to shoulder, with Amara defending her against the venom of his own peers. The crowd shifted. Children looked up with wide eyes. Elders straightened their backs. And for the first time that day, Amara's composure wavered. She didn't need anyone to fight her battles. She had always done it alone. But the sight of someone using power, not to exploit but to protect, lit a spark of something she had long buried: hope. This was the turning point, the moment where two worlds collided: wealth and struggle, privilege and prejudice, power and perseverance. And no one watching would ever forget it. The silence that followed Daniel's stand was heavier than thunder. People stared, unsure if they had truly seen what just happened. A billionaire, a man who could have walked past without ever noticing, had chosen not only to notice, but to stand against arrogance, against cruelty, against a system that thrived on keeping people like Amara invisible. The suited man muttered something bitter under his breath before storming away, his pride wounded more than his body ever could be. The crowd slowly began to murmur again, whispers rolling through the street, disbelief mixing with awe. Children picked up the scattered bread from the ground, elders nodded knowingly, and a few even wiped tears from their eyes. And Amara, she stood frozen, the weight of the moment sinking into her chest. For so long she had carried the burden of being dismissed, overlooked, treated as though her worth was limited to the tasks she performed. Yet here, before everyone, Daniel had shattered that narrative. He had used the very privilege that often shielded cruelty to expose it, to condemn it, but Daniel himself felt something shift deep within. For years he had built walls around his heart, burying his grief under riches, numbing his loneliness with business deals, charity events, and empty conversations. Yet, in this woman's quiet resilience, he saw a truth no amount of wealth could buy: dignity in the face of injustice, compassion in a world starved of kindness, strength without arrogance. In the days that followed, Daniel returned to that community again and again, but this time he wasn't hidden. He brought resources, yes, but more importantly, he brought presence. He listened to the stories of the children, the worries of the parents, the wisdom of the elders. He didn't arrive as a savior. He arrived as a man learning for the first time what humanity really meant. Amara, cautious at first, eventually saw that his actions weren't fleeting gestures. She saw that when Daniel spoke of change, he meant it, not just in donations, but in dismantling the very attitudes and structures that had long pushed her people down. And though she never needed anyone to fix her, she realized something remarkable. Sometimes fixing a broken heart isn't about mending the cracks with your own hands. It's about showing another person that love, dignity, and respect still exist in a world determined to crush them. Together, they started initiatives that went beyond feeding the hungry. They funded education programs, job opportunities, and healthcare resources for those who had been ignored by the wealthy for too long. And though many in Daniel's circles sneered, whispered, or outright condemned him for lowering himself, Daniel no longer cared. He had found something greater than approval. He had found truth. But perhaps the most powerful change was not in Daniel or even Amara. It was in the eyes of the children who watched that day. For the first time, they saw someone powerful use his voice not to silence them, but to lift them up. They saw that the world, though cruel, still held the possibility of justice, and that seed of hope, planted in their young hearts, was worth more than any dollar figure. And as the story of that moment spread beyond the neighborhood, it began to echo in homes, in workplaces, in schools. People debated, reflected, and for some, changed. Not because Daniel Hart was a billionaire, but because he had chosen to act when it mattered most. So let me ask you this. In a world filled with cruelty and division, what do you choose to do when faced with injustice? Will you walk away, comfortable in your silence, or will you stand, even when it's inconvenient, even when it costs you, for what is right? Because, in the end, true wealth is not measured by the numbers in your account, but by the lives you touch, the dignity you protect, and the courage you show when it matters most. And maybe, just maybe, the heart you heal in the process will be your own.